should be live now, just waiting for my own ad to clean up before I really get going. I like to make sure everything's running nice before I... Yep, there we go. Alright, we are in Kerbal Space Program once again. I've done a little bit of stuff since the last time I streamed, not a whole lot. I haven't played this as much as I'd like. We've got Orwise Kerman here, standing next to the flag he just planted on the moon. This is the second time he's landed this particular lander here. The first time he had a couple accidents, so that's why there's a missing solar panel there. But he's done his science and he's ready to go back to orbit, where we will see the next bit of stuff that I've done. Now this lander is not my normal design. This is kind of a compact lander. I had to do some tricksy things with the fuel tanks here to get everything to fit, but had to squeeze this into a payload fairing. That was quite small. Managed to get it up here. It's a little bit prone to falling over, but all things considered not too bad. See where we are relative to the station. Okay, he's just about to go back over, so we're going to fast forward a bit to try and minimize the amount of orbits we have to do to catch back up with him. Okay, he's at 30,000, so we're going to aim for 20 and expect to come up under him. Alright, so we're going to want to go basically straight down toward the horizon. Alright, going into orbit in 3, 2, 1, launch. Need to adjust our trajectory a little bit since we were starting out on that hill. Make sure we're going to clear the edge of the crater here. Let's disable that real quick. That's something I'll show y'all later. It's a new mod that I installed this week. Definitely need some altitude here, or we are going to smash right into the other side of this crater. Oh no! Well, good luck, Matt. I hope you find the right train. And good evening, Chip. I don't mind that you aren't seeing anything, but it's going to be a little weird if you can't, if you don't know what I'm talking about. So, just hey. All right, so we are on a nice long suborbital arc here. So we're just going to set a maneuver node for the top of the arc and try and get into orbit underneath the station here. Fast forward up to there. And yes, that I did say station. I have a full-blown thank you, Chip. I have a full-blown moon space station in orbit. I pushed it up here with one of my more reliable launch vehicles. I have a, it wound up looking rather like a Soyuz spacecraft, so I call it the Kuryuz. I don't remember if I put the B in there or not. Either way, looks like a Soyuz, and quite reliable, can get out to the moon with quite a bit of fuel still left, but I haven't found a really good configuration to also bring a lander along. So I just figured, why need a lander? Just send up the crew every time, use the same lander over and over again. So I launched this in place of a, this lander rode on top of one of them in place of the regular orbiter. Actually, it didn't just replace the, orbiter itself, it replaced only the crew cabin. That's how compact this this lander is. I replaced the crew cabin with a payload fairing and just stuck the lander in there. Alright, so let's work on this rendezvous. We're still a bit behind. So the first order of business is going to be to line up our orbits here. And we'll try and make the rendezvous after that's back aligned. Yeah, we are ever so slightly inclined because of that little off-angle trajectory we had when we launched from the side of that hill. Alright, that maneuver node should fix us. That's 8 minutes, so we're going to have to fast forward around to that. I don't want to bore you all by making you wait for that sort of thing. Got a few more mods installed this time than last time. We've got the Kerbal Alarm Clock, which is the single most useful mod in the game. That keeps you from accidentally fast-forwarding through maneuver nodes like that. Brings you out of time warp a few seconds before you need to worry about your spaceship. The ultimate goal for this stream is to get my Kerbals on their way to Duna, if not to Duna. But I need to unlock a few more tiers of science stuff, so first things first is a couple of moon landings. And the stuff I still need to unlock. I need atomic engines. And I need the better space station capsule. Because no one wants to drive an interplanetary spacecraft from a tight little cramped Apollo module. Alright, we've almost caught up, so let's see. See what kind of rendezvous we can get here. Well, that looked pretty promising. Oh, and I've missed my chance. Nope, I think I still made it. I went ahead and did the maneuver anyway since I accidentally passed it by. Let's just use our maneuvering jets and see if I can't get this encounter a little bit closer. Nope, wrong way. Oh, that's less than half a kilometer, isn't it? Oh, that's only about 100 meters. Okay, this is going to be a nice close call. It'd be pretty embarrassing if I managed to actually hit something with a rendezvous maneuver. The first time I stream it. We shall see. So we can set an alarm for this because this program is fantastic. And according to this program, we're going to come within about 60 meters of the station. About a minute after it brings us out of time warp. So just warping around to the light side of the planet, or of the moon. You always want to do your docking maneuvers on the light side because docking in the dark is a pain in the butt, especially if your computer is not good at handling the lights for the spacecraft. And coming out of time warp now. Alright, so we're going to switch our nav ball to show our relative velocity to the station. And we're going to put ourselves on the retrograde vector here. Alright, so now we're just waiting for the moment of closest approach, so we're going to kill our relative velocities and basically just park this spacecraft right next to the station before we dock with it. We've got a relative velocity of 18.3 meters per second to kill when we do that, so gonna take a bit of definitely a good pulse from the engine here. actual spacecraft, when they're docking, come in much slower than this. This is actual astronauts would consider this approach rather reckless. And in the case of the International Space Station, they don't even allow most spacecraft to dock with the station itself. They just have it get close, and then someone on the station brings it aboard with the robotic arm. Alright, so that worked out pretty well. Let's see how we're... Alright, apologies for the camera swiveling there. I just like to dock from chase camera view. Alright, so the easy way to line up with the docking ports is that they are between the solar panels on either side. Which sounds a little dangerous, so I'm actually going to warp over and close up some of these solar panels, which I can't do because I don't have anything docked with it. So we have to dock with the solar panel still out, so this suddenly got a little more interesting. So we're just going to aim for the empty space to the side of the station that we need to go, and thrust towards it with our RCS thrusters. Alright, so we're closing at about 2 meters per second now, which again is an extremely reckless speed in spacecraft docking. And somehow the station is rotating. Why is the station rotating? There's nothing docked with the station. Why would that be rotating? Alright, let's keep our distance here since this thing's swiveling around like this. Alright, so we need to kill that velocity. Let's go ahead and bring this forward just a tad. That is quite a rotation it's getting up here. Alright, gonna cheat that a little bit and time warp to try and slow down the rotation. And that will briefly kill the rotation, but it's probably gonna start up again because I don't know what's causing it. I might need a new station if that's gonna keep doing that. Alright, so we're coming in now for the final dock here. We're a little bit off-center, but we're going to pop in there. I think we're going to make it anyway. Yeah, and they're just going to kind of nudge around until they connect. Yep, there we go. Alright. No harm, no foul. Now, why the heck is this thing rotating? Well, I mean, I did just kind of ram it with my... Alright, let's kill the rotation. Make sure my reaction wheels are turned off in the lander I just docked, so the lander is not adding any torque to this. Doesn't seem to be any rotation coming up now. Nope, there it's starting to go. That is very strange. Do I have another controller plugged in or something? No, because it was doing that even when I wasn't controlling it. So it's got something to do with the design of this station, I think. That's great. Alright, so, no big deal. We're just going to have to dock very, very carefully from now on. It just adds an extra layer of challenge to this. So we're going to quickly remove all of the science from this lander because we are going right back down onto the moon. take the data. Alright, so we're going to put Orwise briefly on board the station. There's already another Kerbal here. And that would be his buddy Mitfield, who's my typical station commander for these. And what they're going to do is apparently do nothing. Oh, well, that's interesting. I apparently need a third Kerbal in order to clean out the science container. Alright, well that settles that then. Let's go ahead and launch up another crew to bring the bring some of that science home. So we're gonna need another capsule out of here anyway. Alright, so this is going to be the 4th Kuryu's mission. This is the mighty spacecraft here. It's a pretty decent design. The liquid rocket boosters get it up to about 10,000 meters, and then the main engine gets it almost all the way up into orbit. Then this second stage here is enough to get it into orbit and out to the moon, and then it just has to rely on the service propulsion system to get it back from the moon. Very similar to Apollo, but much more in common with the Soyuz. It's like I took an Apollo command module and stuck it on a Soyuz spacecraft. Alright, so let's rename this Kuryu's 4. Alright, 3rd Kuryu's bringing fuel and crew change to the Moonstone station. Alright, I do like to save each of my missions as separate crafts, just so I can go back and later launch the same rocket again if I need to. It's just good to have a little bit of history recorded for your Kerbals. Because I'm weird, is the real answer. The real reason why for that. Alright, so one issue we are going to try and fix with this that I've been running into lately is that these booster rockets tend to... I've had a few very close calls with the boosters when they're separating, so we're going to try and solve that here with a couple of solid rocket motors. And these are nice heavy boosters, so this is going to take quite a bit of force here. Okay, so we're going to detach one booster. And when you're making an addition to a booster like this, you want to just work on one booster and then multiply it to around the rocket again, so that all the changes happen to each booster evenly. Because the last thing you want is for uneven... You don't want your ship going up without an evenly distributed set of rockets on it. So let's try that one there, and this one here. Trying to make sure those are lined up pretty closely. Need to bring this one down just a hair. I'll line them both up on that little lip right here. Yep, okay, so that's hopefully going to be enough to do it. The big question mark is whether or not the exhaust from these little solid rocket motors is going to destroy my main engine. So that's why I've been a little reluctant to put these on here. I've had some incidents with Sepatron motors in the past. Right, and since this is a not quite as heavy a mission, we are also going to just try and save a little bit of money here and launch this with only 3 boosters instead of 4. Make sure everything's still connected properly, and it is... I don't think it is. Nope, definitely not. Alright, so let's move these boosters down a bit. There. Yep, that looks like it did the trick. Make sure they're connected down here. And they are. Alright, so that's going to be a little interesting, I think. Alright, we do have aerodynamic control surfaces on the base of the boosters, so that gives us a little bit of control in the lower atmosphere if we have any issues there. But otherwise, this should fly nice and straight. So let's save that and launch. Alright, let's turn on launch stability. Let's see, are we going to be able to launch straight for the moon here? No, we're going to have to do about half an orbit before we can go after the moon, but that's... I actually rather like that, so that's going to give us just enough time to get up, and then we can head out when we get around to the other side of the planet here. So we're going to have to do about half an orbit before we head out for the moon. Launching in 3, 2, 1, close that, and go. Alright, something's not right here. Alright, let's roll that back into the vehicle assembly building, see what went wrong there. Just, the rocket just kind of settled right back down onto the launch pad with the 3 boosters still going. Oh, I see the problem. Somehow the main engine wound up in separate action group here. Check my staging. That, then that, then that, then that, and good to go. Let's also check and see what crew we've got here. So I definitely want to send Nielsen and Billy Bob G. I think I'm going to just make this a crew of 2. And then one of them is going to stay up there. Yeah, I'm gonna move Nielsen into the, actually, no reason not to make that a full crew, so let's bring Seaski along. Yep, we're going to move Nielsen into the station as a permanent resident so we don't run into the issue we're having now, and then they're going to bring back just 2 people. Alright, so let's try that launch again. Let's hope we actually go somewhere this time. Alright, throttle to full, stabilization on. Everything seems green. 3, 2, 1, and launch. There we go, actually moving this time. Definitely much easier to get lift when you're not just firing with 3 weaker booster rockets. Just about 1 kilometer, accelerating at about 1 G. That's right where we want to be here. The Kerbal Space Center down here. I don't know if any of you follow the Kerbal Space Program developers, but they just had an announcement yesterday that the next version of the game, they have given toughnesses to the different buildings, so if you accidentally crash into them, they might explode. And then you have to pay to have them rebuilt, which costs a lot of money, so fly safe. Or, you know, if you just really hate one building, you can blow it up and you don't have to worry about that part anymore. It was kind of their tongue-in-cheek answer to people who didn't want the next building that they're adding, that changes how you play the game a little bit. It's like, okay, you don't want that building, just blow it up. The developer had a rather clever little rig he had hidden behind the building during the announcement, where it was just this six-wheeled monstrosity with a couple booster rockets on the top. So when he hit the spacebar, they fired right into the back of the building and blew the whole thing to smithereens. 5 kilometers, still climbing pretty good, just passing through the cloud layer. That's another mod we've installed. Most of these parts are from KW Rocketry, which is a very cool mod, adds a bunch of extra pieces that are inspired by stock, so they fit in pretty well with the rest of your stuff. They definitely have their own style, though. We're using the liquid fuel boosters come from KW Rocketry, whereas the fuel tanks do as well. I think the separators and actually pretty much this entire rocket comes from KW except for these 3 engines down the bottom. Alright, 10,000, we're beginning our gravity turn. Increasing throttle, we're just about to drop the boosters. There they go. Okay, that was pretty cool. So that was a very dramatic separation. It doesn't look like they came close to hitting me, though I was definitely holding my breath. That was quite a noise. And a very lovely pirouette they did. I just watched that in the in my own replay there. Going to turn over a little more aggressively here. Apoapsis is currently sitting at about 30,000, so we're going to keep burning up at this angle for a little while. Coming up on 30,000 now, still climbing. Top of our orbit, top of our trajectory now about 40,000. We definitely need more altitude. Gaining quite a bit of lateral velocity now, but we still need to keep climbing, so I'm going to keep it pitched up just a bit. Alright, there we go. That's climbing nicely now, so we're going to start to pitch over. We're just breaking 40,000, so there's not much atmosphere to hold us down, so it doesn't really matter. We're not climbing for altitude quite as much anymore. We can just keep burning for orbital velocity here. Just need to get going nice and fast. And that was the first stage has finished burning. Separate that and light the new rockets. Alright, we have our initial suborbital trajectory. We've separated from the first stage, so we're just going to set the maneuver node that'll put us into orbit. Bit of a steep climb. I prefer something a little bit more gradual, but didn't quite know if we were going to make it there for a moment, so I had to keep us going up a bit harder. Got the node set. We're going to start our next burn when this countdown reaches about 33 seconds. We have reached space. Alright, just gonna warp ahead and get this burn done. 3, 2, 1, and burn. Got our upper stage motor here is another one of the KW motors. It's a little twin nozzle thing that's quite efficient. Doesn't have as much punch though, so you definitely want to be out of the atmosphere before you really need it. And this is going to give us the rest of the kick we need to get into actual orbit here. And we're going for an orbit at about 90 kilometers, which keeps us out of the range of the space station and away from some orbital debris that's left over up here. That's from us. Yeah, we've got some debris floating around from from our, what's that from? Oh, very nice. We've got some debris floating around from our initial moon rocket attempts. And from our very own Curious 3. Alright, so that's us in orbit, I believe. 90,000 by 95, so not a very circular orbit, but I think we can manage with that. Hide the debris again there. Alright, so we're going to put the moon on that side of the planet, so that tells us we're going to want to start our maneuver right about here. So basically noon on the day side of the planet is where our maneuver is going to be this time. Just extend that out to where it intercepts the moon. Alright, we're not going for a free return trajectory this time because we definitely want to hit the... We want to be going around the moon from a... want to be orbiting it the same direction the station is orbiting, so that we don't have to spend a whole bunch of fuel turning our orbit around. Yep, that should work there. Alright, that's our target orbit. So it's going to go ahead and spin the spacecraft around so that we're pointing in the right direction, and then we'll time warp up to this maneuver node and move out to the moon. So we have something you'll notice here. We have about 165 Kerbin days, which is about 41 actual days worth of missions to do before our window to head for Duna opens up. Close alarm. Alright, and I don't think this, since I only used 3 boosters there, I don't think we have quite enough fuel to make it all the way out to the moon on just this booster alone. So we're going to go ahead and light that in a few seconds, because the service module's engine is not quite up to the task of getting us all the way out there. If we do make it, then we'll just try and aim it so that this booster falls into the moon itself and just shatters. Later missions with this are probably going to use a liquid-fueled service module so that they can just dump off extra fuel when they get to the station. Turn this into not just a... oh, we're actually going to make it. That's pretty unexpected, so let's... No, we're not going to make it. According to this. Alright, so we've got us on a nice impact trajectory right now. So this is where we're going to ditch the booster here. Going to pivot so that we're pointing away from our own trajectory, because the last thing we want is to accidentally burn into our own booster. We're going to jettison that. That should also minimize any changes to the orbit from the force of separation there. And that will guarantee that this booster slams into the moon instead of becoming an issue for us later. Alright, so let's do a minor burn here, trying to get our orbits so that we're not going to flat out hit the moon. about 25,000 here. Perfect. Okay, so let's set our next alarm for when we actually get to within spitting distance of the moon. And go ahead and time warp out there. So this is our command module here. We've got a service module with some batteries, RCS, and communication antenna, as well as our main engine, which burns the same fuel as the RCS thrusters do. We've also got a nice big reaction wheel here. That lets us keep control when we're using this like a tugboat to attach station modules. And this is our docking port, which we'll open that up when we get closer to the station. I forgot I put that on there. There's a pair of thermometers on either side of the crew cabin. Alright, so coming up on the moon now. You can see our booster rocket out there about 25 kilometers away. That should hit before we do, as we had to slow our orbit down to avoid the same fate. Hopefully that'll still be in sight when it slams into the surface. That would be pretty neat to watch. Oh, and there it goes. It's gone. Alright, so let's just get into the moon's gravitational influence here. Now, the Kerbal Space Program is pretty awesome, but it's not quite capable of doing multi-body physics simulations yet. It keeps wanting me to... I say yet, they're probably never going to be able to do full-blown simulation with multiple sources of gravity. NASA is still having trouble with that. Alright, so we're just going to get into a highly elliptical orbit here first. I don't want to set that as my target. I want to perform a maneuver. So let's go ahead and hide the flags so I can actually put this maneuver here. There we go. Alright, we just want to get into orbit. We don't want to bring the orbit down very far just yet. And that'll let us fix our inclination without spending too much fuel either. And then we can trim the orbit down from there. So let's set an alarm for that maneuver node and warp up to it. See if we can see our booster rocket going down. That might be it over here. Nope, nothing. Let's see, is that already impacted? Yep, looks like that's already gone. Alright, so coming up on our maneuver here, just under a minute, so we're going to keep fast forwarding for a bit here. That alarm brought us out of time warps to make sure we don't miss our maneuver. And again, we're just getting into orbit, so we're going to do about 100 meters per second of velocity change. We're going to start our burn in about 4 seconds here. 3, 2, 1, and burn. You'll see this is a pretty weak engine, barely even a gasp coming out of there. But that's what we want. This engine is very efficient. Hardly uses up any fuel at all. Alright, so that's perfect. So now we are going to set our next maneuver for all the way out here. Because the farther you are from the body you're orbiting, the less momentum you need to change your orbit in any significant way. So this is going to use considerably less fuel than if we tried to do this on the other side of the orbit. Having a little bit of trouble getting this orbit in the right spot, or this maneuver node in the right spot. Alright, that looks good enough. Let's find where that node is on our nav ball. So we're pointing in the right direction when we get there. Turn off our RCS so we don't burn the much needed fuel. Set our alarm and warp around to the other side of the moon so we can go ahead and do this maneuver. And from there we're going to go straight for a rendezvous at the station. So we can get right back to science. And once we have enough science, we're going to bring this capsule home, loaded with all the science that they collected on the surface of the moon. And you can see this maneuver is only going to take about 26 meters per second, so less than a quarter of the maneuver we just did to get into orbit we're going to need to put us on the correct orbit. Which is quite a discount. If we tried to do that on the other side, it probably would have taken about 100 or so meters per second. Because it's quite a change in angle. Doing the maneuver now. Not quite there just yet. Yep, I think that's as close as I'm going to get for this particular pass. Alright, so we're also going to shrink our orbit down a bit on that pass. And you see the rendezvous marker going crazy like that. We want to go for the soonest available rendezvous, regardless of how much fuel it costs us. Alright, so we're going to go for the rendezvous before that one. So we're just going to want to bring that pink marker all the way around the moon one more time. And go for the smallest amount of separation there we can get. And it's half a kilometer, 0.4, 0.7 again, 0.6, 0.1. Perfect. Alright, so that's the maneuver we're going for. It's going to happen on this vector and in about 25 minutes. So adding the alarm and fast forwarding to that moment. Alright, this one's going to take about 84 meters per second to get us into that rendezvous, and we'll kill the rest of our relative velocities when we get there. So I'm going to be very careful to make sure we're not passing too terribly close to the station, because I don't know how long it'll take me to kill our relative velocities there, because it's going to be considerably more than the previous rendezvous was. And doing it in this particular fashion lets us do the rendezvous with only a single pass around the moon, and bring us to a total of, I think, we'll be coming right up on beginning our third orbit. So we're just starting our second orbit now. So yeah, we'll be beginning our third orbit when we actually rendezvous at the station, which is pretty good for an intercept here. I've done better. I've had approaches where I didn't have to correct my plane very much, and was able to do the to insert into a rendezvous pretty much right away. And then just going to manually tweak this rendezvous a tad. Half a kilometer. Perfect. Alright, so the next alarm we're going to set is for our closest approach, which this is estimated to be between 200 and 300 meters from the station. So we're going to have about a minute's warning on that. I might bring us out of warp a little bit early to make sure we're not going to hit the thing. Just extend the antenna for a little bit more of a aesthetic factor. Alright, let's do this orbit. So we're still on the pretty elliptical orbit, so we're going to fly out pretty far before we come back towards the moon. Alright, so we've got 93 meters per second of relative velocity to kill, which, if I remember right, took us about 6 seconds previously. Alright, coming up on the space station really quickly here. There's no actual command pod on the station itself, so that's why it keeps changing its own names. And right now it thinks it's a ship module named Moonstone Part 1, because that's what the Moonstone Part 1 was the name of the rocket that launched the science lab into orbit. We will eventually be adding a command module to the station, though I might... oh, yeah, past that a little bit too. Well, I think we're going to get in a nice parking maneuver here. kill the last bit of our relative velocity here with our maneuvering jets. And we are parked 500 meters from the station. Not bad at all. Swing our nose around to point at the station and switch into chase cam mode so we know how we're controlling this thing. And we're going to move into dock. Alright, we're going to do this about 1 meter per second and fast forward a good chunk of the way. So since we're doing 5 times time acceleration, it's like we're doing this at 5 meters per second, which is incredibly reckless, but we're not. So we still have, just over 3/4 of our fuel left, plus a little bit more in the nose cone here. Starting to drift off target, so let's let's close a little bit faster here. You want to close the distance before you start drifting apart just from being on different orbits. So, gotta get nice and close before you can safely park your ship. Alright, we're about 60 meters away now. We're going to go for a nice pass here, probably about 40 meters, and then kill our velocity there. $30 that's not bad at all. And we're parked. Alright, so our relative velocity is now 0, so we're not moving towards it, we're not moving away from it. So we're going to swivel back around. We are conveniently on the side of the free docking port, and the ship has barely started to rotate, so let's get in there quick now and dock with it before it starts going crazy again. Open our docking node, and we're going to move in this direction. Rotate a bit so that we're mostly lined up. We don't want to hit the... And the last thing we want to do is hit the solar panels, which we are currently lined up to do. Alright, this looks pretty good. Let's see how we are here. Alright, very nice. So all we have to do is keep on target while the station starts rotating again. Want to keep our nose pointed at the pink circle, and keep the velocity vector on there as well if we can, though that will be moving around a bit as we adjust. And here we go, this is going to be perfect. And docked. So it's looking like a proper space station right now, though it's effectively just a science lab with some fuel tanks on it. And you can see the station starting to rotate now that we've got a bigger reaction wheel attached. So we're going to disable all of the reaction wheels on here. Make sure none of those are adding any phantom forces to this. actually, let's leave this one turned on and turn on the stabilization. Yeah, that seemed to take care of the rotation there. A bit of a wobble as it's trying to compensate. So that's encouraging. So hopefully when we expand the station, all we'll need to do is include a nice big reaction wheel in the next module, and that should be able to control the keep this from going absolutely crazy. I mean, we shall see. Anyway, now that we have a proper command module connected, that means we should be able to, yep, clean up the 2 science experiments on this lander. Go ahead and move Neil home. Keep my distance from the solar panels, because you can easily destroy those with a flying Kerbal. Right, we're going to make Nielsen the next moon pilot here, I think, since Orwise is already in the station and doing important scientific work that we don't want to interrupt. There we are. Now let's refill the fuel tanks on the lander. All this extra fuel was brought up here by previous Kuryu's rockets. The 3, I believe, was the one that boosted it up into this orbit, and that also topped off the fuel tanks before it left. Alright, one more tank to fill up here on the back side of the lander. And I would like to bring a better lander up here eventually, but for now this little mini lander will suffice. It's got more than enough fuel to get down and back up again, which is all that matters. Just at some point I'm probably going to crash land and have to go rescue this guy, and at that point I'll bring a new lander out here. I haven't unlocked the 2-seater yet, so that's what I'd like to replace this with eventually, is the 2-seater. Right, and that's full. Let's top off the RCS tanks. I can do that from him. There we go, all of our tanks are filled up, and I know that's, not everyone knows you can do that, but anytime you have 2 ships connected to each other, or 2 parts of the same ship, if you right-click one fuel tank, and then you hold the Alt key and right-click another, you can move fuel around with this little interface here. You can bring up even more items if you'd like, just keep holding down Alt, but you can only transfer fuel and stuff between 2 of them. So it does let you bring up multiple right-click menus at once, so you can check and see that all your modules here are properly filled up with RCS fuel, which this is not, so we're going to top that off. Turn that reaction wheel back on. Yes, Seeski Kerman is very, very happy Kerbal. He once spent a very long time alone on the moon, and he hasn't quite been the same ever since. He was my first rescue mission, actually. Alright, so we're disconnecting the lander here. We've removed all the science from on board, so no worries in that department. I'm going to point that at the retrograde vector here. Make sure we're controlling from inside the cabin. And we're aiming for this crater right here, this nice big fat crater where we have not... Now I'm getting a little bit of a targeting bug here. Where's the station? There it is. So let's set that as target. And unset target. Did that clear up the bug? Yes, it did. Okay. Yeah, Seeski doesn't go down to the moon anymore. He stays up in the space stations where he's nice and safe. Alright, so we're going to go for a nice, efficient approach to this. I'm going to do a nice high pass from about 7,000 kilometers here. And once we cross the lip of the crater, then we're going to start burning our descent. It's going to look pretty hairy for a few seconds there, because we're going to get very close to the lip of the crater coming in, if I remember my previous attempt at this correctly. Alright, coming up on our maneuver now. Nice and dark over here, isn't it? Can't see a bloody thing. Silhouette the spacecraft against the Milky Way? I guess it's probably still the Milky Way. Presume this is the same galaxy as us, at least. Yes, space is very large. Alright, so we're at least going to get into the sunlight here. You can see the lander and the station separating a bit on the orbital diagram here. So we're just going to land in this crater and try and get a little bit more science to try and unlock some things before we take it all back to Kerbin itself. So getting a bit close here. Ah, there we are. This is the crater we are going to land in. So we are still doing 500 some meters per second relative velocity. Bit closer. Yeah, go ahead and start burning now. Alright, so we are on an impact trajectory now. Put out the landing legs. We are aiming for this nice flat patch here if we can do it. I'm sure they're probably streaming something considerably more interesting than Kerbal Space Program. Though I might keep this up because I might be about to explode, depending on how rough this landing is. Hey, it's 3:20 in the morning. I'd like to think that this would be a quiet time to stream. reduce our throttle just a tad since we're starting to oscillate there. I'm a little worried we're going to hit inside this crater, which would be pretty rough. Okay, no, we're definitely going to come down in this patch right here. I'm just worried that's not as flat as it looks. Alright, we're going to let ourselves get a little bit closer, then start killing our velocity again once we're down near the surface. My frame rate is all over the place. And yes, you can already see I've had one interesting landing with this spacecraft. It's missing one of its solar panels. I'm going to keep the engine running probably all the way down to the ground now. Just trying to kill the last bits of our lateral velocity and come down gently. We've still got plenty of fuel. We're going to need considerably less to get into orbit than we did to get down. Because you have a nice efficient arc to get into orbit, and you're coming down, especially into a crater, you tend to do it pretty inefficiently. At least I did here. We're getting awfully close to the ground now. You can see my shadow right here. Good indicator of how close to the ground we are. Rotate a little bit just so we're hitting with two legs at the same time. You don't want to bounce on a single leg. That would be a little bad. Alright, we're down below 10 meters per second, so we're in safe landing range now. Still want to get that down a little bit lower, but trying to be careful. I don't want to slow down so much that I start going back up. And touchdown. There we go. That was pretty flat, I think. Yeah, that's probably the flattest spot I've landed on the moon so far. Let's see where we landed. So, missed my intended target by about half a crater, but still in the crater, so that's all that matters for us. Do a little bit of science. You leave the sample bay doors open for a while and go do something else. We'll see what happens to the mystery goo. It seems to be less dense. All very important scientific observations here. Oh, I don't have an antenna on this. Alright. Alright, so we're going to very quickly... I don't have a ladder on this, because I hadn't unlocked ladders when I built this lander, so he has to jump off of the lander very carefully to avoid breaking anything. And he fell over. And he's fine. Look at that smile. Alright, so now we have the luxury of naming this place. There's the space station going overhead. Get onto the side with the sunlight. Any ideas for the name? There's definitely resource gathering. In this case, you're gathering a resource called science that you can use to earn money back on the planet, and that also gets you prestige and unlocks new parts. So we get to plant our flag. Bink. Of course he turns it so that it's backwards from the direction we can actually read the flag. Thundara. That's not a reference I'm familiar with. This is Nielsen, right? Thundara crater. Nielsen came, he saw, and then he got tired and went home. Well, it's Thundara now. It's too late to change. I think I can. Yeah, I can read the plaque, but I can't change the. Can't change it now. Sorry. Anyway, let's get back up into the spacecraft, and we'll leave Seeski down here for one more orbit. Or this is not Seeski. This is Nielsen. Where's the, oh, there's the hatch. Yeah, poor Seeski is still up in the station. So we're going to wait for the station to go back around one more time before we take off. What on earth did you do, Matt? Shut down the orange line. Yee. Oh dear. Alright, so bringing the station back around again so we can just boost right up there and catch it. Perfect. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and take off here. Got everything we came for. Rotate and retract the landing gear. Make sure we're still pointing above the lip of the crater. Last thing you want to do is take off and slam right into the side of your crater there. Ah, so the other people on the train stopped it for you. That's good. That means it's not your fault. Am I going to clear the Yeah, so we're going to boost our orbit up just a tiny bit here. We want to go to about 20,000. We're practically in orbit already. We're just very, very low to the ground. Someone was screaming that her baby fell out of the window to stop the train for you. That's amazing. I want to know what thought process goes through someone's mind that, like, the most logical thing to do here is to shout, "My baby fell on the tracks." Also, what kind of subway are you on that has windows that open? So I'm pretty sure we're not going to smash into the ground here, but pretty sure is not 100%, unfortunately. So I did a really low trajectory to get into orbit, so I'm not going to be able to time warp for a hot minute or two. Got a nice curve and rise here. I think we can time warp now. Yeah, only up to 10x though. Okay, we're definitely clear of everything now. Bit of a close call with the lip of the crater, but not too bad. I've had much worse. You can kind of see how I tricked the game into letting me use 4 fuel tanks here. These yellow pipes feed fuel into the central section so that the rocket can use it still. And just about to push ourselves into orbit. Had a pretty efficient launch there. We only need 20 more meters per second to actually get into orbit. We might even be able to go straight for a rendezvous. I don't seem to be able to target anything. Alright, we are in a 20 by 20 orbit, so almost perfectly circular, which is a rarity for me. There we go, now I can target that. Alright, so we are almost a whole degree off on our orbit, so we just need to correct that a little bit, and then we can go for the rendezvous. That should do the trick. So I like this little mini lander design. That was quite a bunch of science we just brought back up with us. And we're going to take this back to Kerbin and see if we can't launch a ship to Duna. Since I'm using the space station the way I'm doing, is I've landed on the I do have some extra mods installed. A lot of the parts I'm using are from mods, and the But the objectives are all vanilla Kerbal Space Program at the moment. Though the objectives and the science gathering and all that is completely optional. There is an entire mode you can just go straight into that's sandbox mode. You have all the parts, unlimited money, just do whatever the heck you want. And that's definitely the way to start playing. That's actually how I wound up learning Kerbal Space Program, because that's the only mode that was available until just a few updates ago. So I am actually pulling ahead of the space station now, so I need to lift my orbit a bit so I can go back to the station. Might even be able to get a rendezvous here if I do this right. Let's see. Yeah, this is going to become a rendezvous here. Bit of a high-speed one, but I think I'm okay with high speed at this point. I'm just wanting to minimize the amount of time that y'all spend waiting for me. Like the space rendezvous, you can play the game for quite a long time without ever having to perform a rendezvous maneuver. Though that's one of the most useful things to learn, because once you can dock two ships in orbit, you can get a lot farther in the game, because that lets you design stuff that uses less fuel to go the same distance. Or like in the situation I'm doing, you can reuse the same lander over and over again just by docking it to a station and refueling it. Alright, so we gotta kill about 30 meters per second of relative velocity in order to get into parking near the space station here. Close enough to the station to actually see it now, quite clearly. Alright, so we have killed our relative velocity. So it's going to swivel around to point at the station and move into dock. So I like the chase cam because that swivels the camera to point where you're pointing. Makes it a little bit easier to dock with another ship here. Zoom in here about 2 meters per second and time accelerate. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of picking a spot in space near the station that I want to go to and changing this little yellow cross on the nav ball here. That tells you where you're heading. So I'm using the translation controls on the keyboard to make that. You just want to point at the spot where you want to go and then get that little dot on the on your nose vector. The orange V is where you're pointing, the yellow cross is where you're going. So if you have those lined up, then you're going where you're looking. And when that disappeared there, that was me killing my relative velocity of the station. Apologies if I make anyone seasick here. Just did kind of a gut-wrenching maneuver there to flip us around to point back at the station. Oh, I haven't set this as my target yet. That's the ticket there. You definitely want to make sure you have the docking port targeted that you want to connect to. Oh, we're passing on to the dark side of the moon here soon. At least it's not rotating this time. I wish I had some lights on this thing. Of course, I've only got myself to blame since I built this spacecraft and didn't put lights on it, because I didn't think I would need lights. I think we're docked. Oh, I came in that a little bit weird of an angle, so that's going to pivot around a bit before they finally get connected. There we go. Successful docking. That was a little tense. That was I probably should have spun the station around so that the docking port I was going for was in the light. That was kind of risky. I'm lucky I didn't break the solar panels again. Speaking of, I can go ahead and retract that solar panel so I don't break that when I leave. So we're going to take all the science that we have stored there and grab a little bit of science from take what science we got on the surface and move that into the we're going to move that into the larger spacecraft that we brought over. And that is going to head back to Kerbin with all the data that we can possibly put in it. Got some more experiments in there. So he's just going to drop this off with them. Okay, so now all the science is aboard that one spacecraft. We're going to put Nielsen back in his lander cabin. And we are heading back to Kerbin. Just get away from the station so that we don't bump into anything. Okay, so in order to get back to the main planet, you want to kill some of your relative velocity to the moon. You want to escape the moon's gravity by going backwards along the orbit. So that kills your orbit relative to the planet, I mean. When you leave the moon's influence, you want to be going that way relative to the planet. Trust me, it makes sense. If you were to do that on the other side of the moon, you would be going into a higher orbit than the moon. It would actually escape the influence of Kerbin entirely. But by going backwards, you wind up killing all of the moon's orbital velocity and can actually splash right back down on the planet if you do it right. But if you try to be sneaky, you can actually use that going around the other side of the moon to get a little bit of an easier escape vector from Kerbin. You don't have to use quite as much fuel to get it, but it's really difficult to do that and be pointed anywhere you actually want to go. So you wind up using more fuel just trying to adjust your course after the fact. You're better off just going straight for where you want to go from Kerbin. If you really need to do a gravity assist, you can do it around another planet instead. So let's see, we need to... We need to point that way. Let's make sure that's not straight at our space station. Nope, space station's over there, so we shouldn't hit that on the way out. Set an alarm for our maneuver. And then I get to show you the other neat mod that I found this week. The devs themselves actually spotlighted this one. You can get the link for it in the launcher of the Kerbal Space Program game at the moment. It is a mod that is... I'm trying to remember the name. It's... Aerodynamic Trajectories, I think? It's a... the mod lets you set where you're going to land on a planet with an atmosphere. Or it helps you plot out an aerobraking maneuver if you don't want to land. Takes a little bit of the guesswork out of Kerbal Space Program anyway. A little of the trial and error gets removed, which is always good. You always want to minimize the number of times you have to try something before you can do it right. Because trying things tends to lead to explosions. So we're just about 10 seconds away from our maneuver here. And we're going to aim for a altitude of about 80,000, maybe down to 70. And we'll adjust from there once we're out of the moon's gravity. Alright, doing our escape burn. Leaving the station far behind now. So the Kerbin's atmosphere goes up to about 70,000 meters. Just gonna keep that burn going. 75. There we go. So anything lower than 70,000 and you're looking at entering the atmosphere, which we fully intend to do, but not quite yet. Okay, so now we have our... We're back in the influence of Kerbin rather than the moon. So now we're going to show off what this mod can do. I'm not using any of the fancy aerodynamic systems or anything. So all of this stuff is pretty much irrelevant. What this does is this shows you what's going to happen to your trajectory after you pass through the atmosphere of the planet. In this case, we are going to bring our orbit down just a tad. And you're going to see this white circle is going to start shrinking, and the red is where our current orbit intersects the atmosphere. Alright, so if I wanted, I could perform what's called an aerobrake, which if I did... Go on, look at Kerbin. There we go. If I wanted to, I could cut through Kerbin's atmosphere and wind up in this arc right here, which would actually put me in a really good trajectory to dock with this space station here, if I wanted to, instead of landing back on the planet. And this isn't going to cost me any more fuel whatsoever. This is just going to happen on the trajectory I'm currently on. Though if I wanted to actually get into orbit, I would have to boost back out of the atmosphere on this side of the planet. But it takes a lot less fuel than if I was to just go around to here and then try and slow myself down with my own engine. The other nifty thing that this allows me to do is this lets me pick where I want to land. Which in this case is actually going to be on the wrong side of the planet. So we are going to just use an aerobraking maneuver to get into orbit first. Because I want to land as close to the Space Center as possible. Alright, so we're going to enter the atmosphere right about here, past 34 kilometers above the surface, and then back out of the atmosphere again. With nothing to slow us down but our own aerodynamic drag. So we do want to get a little closer. And want to make sure you have your antennas and any solar panels you might have retracted. Our solar panels are just kind of fastened onto the outside of the ship, so going to be okay there, I think. Might lose them in the atmosphere, but I don't think so. So this part actually gets a little intense. You're basically burning up in the atmosphere for a few minutes. Going to create quite the streak. Oh, here's an interesting illustration of why I'm trying not to... why I try and crash parts of my ships into the ground. This is actually a piece of debris from an earlier flight. We're passing less than 30 kilometers from it, which is a pretty close call in terms of spaceflight. That little piece of dirt is closer to me than the ground out the window. Not sure what that is. That's probably... that might actually be a used up robot core that I used to launch a module up to the station without a pilot on it. I usually jettison those, and they're small enough that I don't really worry about them as far as debris is concerned. Now, kind of one of the neat things about Kerbal Space Program is that it's really hard to kill your Kerbals without actually flying into something. So, while I'm rotating my ship to try and minimize the G-forces they're going to go through, it really doesn't matter. You can slam into the atmosphere extremely quickly with them sitting sideways in the cabin, and they'll be just fine. So yeah, we're experiencing re-entry effects here. Our engine being lit up quite vibrantly at the moment. The old Apollo missions did something kind of similar to this, as they didn't want to enter the atmosphere too steeply. So they would usually skim through the atmosphere a couple of times before they came back down for good to kill some of their momentum. Though they wouldn't go so far into the atmosphere that they started producing shock heating effects. Alright, so we're beginning to go back up now. And we are on a pretty good trajectory for our landing as well. The Space Center is... Let's bring debris up here. Yeah, the Space Center's right about here, so we're just going to have to add a little forward momentum on this side of our orbit, and then we should come down right by the Space Center. So the reason this target, this is where we're actually going to land, the reason that is separate from, say, this here or this up here is aerodynamic drag is going to slow us down as we enter the atmosphere. That's the red line. And then the planet itself is rotating. So that is what is going to be under this red line by the time we get there. So this is not something that is in the game by default. This is the trajectories mod. Shows you where you're going to land. Very useful, that. And I like how they added it to this toolbar up here. It's very... That's pretty cool. Looks like the button's supposed to be there, which I like. So we still got a bit more time in the atmosphere before we're completely out of it. You don't want to fast forward while you're in the atmosphere, because that can break the game's physics, and then all kinds of weird things happen. You can see the city lights down there. That's also another mod that looks to make Kerbin a little bit more spectacular from space. Adds city lights and clouds. Because the planet just looks weird without clouds. So just waiting for us to get out of the atmosphere, and then we can worry about our trajectory on the other side of the planet. Yes, aerobraking maneuvers are always a little boring if you do them in real time. So apologies for that, but we are almost through the atmosphere. We're up at about 60,000 meters at the moment, so we'll be leaving the atmosphere in less than 10 kilometers. You can see on our external atmospheric pressure gauge that we're pretty much already clear of the atmosphere now. It's just the faint traces of gases still clinging to the outside of the hull. Should be able to extend the antenna now without any ill effects. Alright, we're going to need to boost our orbit a bit, so we're going to have to point forward in our orbit. Seeski and Billy Bobji, Kerman, in command. They look like they're in the two pilot seats, so no one's actually in the command seat at the moment. Let's see what this looks like from their perspective. Yeah, they're pretty happy. And with that music cue, we are back in space. So let's see, we want to... orbit forward just a bit. Got quite a lot of debris out here. Alright, so now we've accelerated our orbit just a tad. We're going to give ourselves a tiny bit of boost here. And we're going to look to bring this cross closer to this little debris marker. Like that. Alright, so this might be one of the closest landings that I've gotten yet. Usually I aim for the ocean offshore, but this time I want to see if we can actually land in the Space Center itself. So we're going to decouple. Decouple. There we go. Rotate the capsule to point with the heat shield down towards the atmosphere. And our Kerbals in a heads-down position to keep them the most comfortable as possible on their way back down. I speak good. So much grammar in that sentence there. Alright, so we're just going to fast forward up to where we're back in the atmosphere. And then it's just a roller coaster ride all the rest of the way down. Alright, so from here on out, the only button I'm going to hit is the parachute button once we're down near the ground. Everything else is just the game's own physics doing our job for us. In real time, so we should be back on the ground in just a couple minutes. Hopefully. The part I'm looking forward to the most with this mod is if that landing site is as accurate as I hope it is, then I should be able to bring reusable spacecraft into this. Things sort of like the space shuttle, where you can land the vehicle right back at the Space Center on the runway instead of splashing down with just a capsule. Though I'm still quite a ways from unlocking the really good spaceplane engines. Still pretty high up in the atmosphere, about 55 kilometers now. Not really feeling the effects of the not really feeling the atmospheric effects just yet. Should be starting up in another 20 or so kilometers. Now you'll notice our capsule is starting to rotate a bit. That's aerodynamic drag is starting to have an effect on the capsule, and it's going to spin around in such a way that the what happens is you wind up with the center of mass being the whole vehicle will rotate around the center of mass, and it'll point in such a way that it kind of works like a windsock. So it effectively winds up pointing back along its vector, and it'll stay pointed this direction. The wind will just keep it in this orientation because it's got more mass towards the lighter end of the it has more mass towards this end of the vehicle. I got that completely wrong, I think. It rotates around its center of mass. The wind resistance forces it into this configuration here, since it's hitting this side and the air is just kind of going around. Same idea as a wind vane. It's pointing into the wind. And we've rotated a tiny bit, so Kerbals are not entirely as comfortable as they could be, though we're not experiencing very much deceleration yet. And we're starting to oscillate around our retrograde vector here. There we go. So now we're far enough into the atmosphere that the game has realized we're going to land this time, rather than go back into orbit. So it's swiveled us around to this much more pleasing camera. So if I did this completely wrong, we're going to hit that mountain range here. And probably die. But if that mod works like I think it does, and I didn't ruin our chances of making a good landing with the separation maneuver I did, then we should pass just over the mountains and land very, very close to the Space Center itself. If not in the Space Center. So the maneuver we're going for here would effectively be like the Apollo capsule landing right back on Kennedy Space Center. Which they sort of do now with the Soyuz capsules. They don't land back at the Cosmodrome, but they land within a pretty small area of where they want them to be now. There's our service module going down with us. That's going to get deleted automatically when it would impact the ground. Though it's still close enough that the game is factoring in the physics for it, so you might even see it explode if it's still pretty close to us. Oh, so yeah, I guess that's a good reason to not land back at the Space Center with this particular model of spacecraft in the new version, because if I'm really unlucky and this hits a building, that would damage the building in the new version of the game. Got some coming in pretty shallow, but we're starting to see some flames around the edge of the spacecraft here. And we are definitely clear of the mountains. The Space Center right along this coastline up ahead. Should be right there. Really feeling the deceleration now, about 2 Gs on the meter down here. Still in the green for the Kerbals. Seeski and Billy Bob G both still all smiles as we come down. Almost up to a full 3 Gs of force. That's the Space Center right here. You can see the runway and a couple buildings. And that little marker here is the launch pad and the docking clamps that held us to the launch pad before we launched the rocket here. So this is going to be a very close landing. Hopefully. Alright, so that's a lot of our velocity has been lost already. We're just going subsonic now. And once we enter the cloud layer, I'm going to pop the parachutes. And we're going to come down right on top of the Space Center. That is super neat. I've never gotten this close with without the help of that mod. I think we're going to land in the field just west of the center itself. free fall now. I'm entering the cloud layer. I'm going to go ahead and pop the chutes. Ooh, that frame rate just... It's loading in all the buildings now that are below us, so that's probably what killed that. We are less than 5 kilometers from the launch pad now, so we'll see what the final number is once we actually land, but not even the full length of the runway away, I don't think. That is neat. Don't need numbers now. It's just a ride at this point. And the parachutes have fully deployed, and these are going to set us nice and gently back on the ground. This is the only time in this entire flight I feel safe fast forwarding. And thud. So pretty darn close to the Space Center. Could probably walk there, but we're just going to bring the HUD back and recover the spacecraft. So tons and tons of science there from those 2 moon missions we recovered. Got quite a lot of parts left. About 7,226 funds recovered from just the spacecraft alone. Not good. That was about a $50,000 spacecraft, but not particularly bad either. I think I'm pretty happy with that. So we were landed right about here. Pretty darn close. Alright, so let's see what parts we can unlock, see if that's enough to get us a Duna mission. And if that is, we're going to go for that launch, and then maybe land that on another stream. I don't really need the claw just yet. Right, so we want the nuclear engine. That's the miniature docking port. I don't really need that. These are some bigger spaceplane parts. I can only get 1 more of these, so better make it a good one. This is, I think, the one we're going to have to go with. This is the bigger lander cabin.